Traffic Center time and Jim Talamonte.
Inbound I-57, traffic stuffed up from 119th to 107th where there's a crash reported. We see more delays around 99th to the Verge. It's 22 minutes from I-80 to the Ryan. Fisher Ford, 25 minutes, 80-94 to the Verge. Ryan running 23 minutes, 95th to downtown. The Edens, 21 minutes, Lycook Junction. Kennedy, 30 minutes, O'Hare to downtown. 12 from Montrose, 10 on the Express. Outbound, 26 minutes to the airport. Inbound Eisenhower, 42 minutes, 390 to the Burn Circle. Outbound 31. Stevenson, now 44 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. Northbound Tri-State traffic slow southwest highway to 75th. Eastbound Adams Colway 31 Beverly after a crash. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next, and in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Cloudy, windy, and milder today. High near 44, 32 overnight, 22 at O'Hare. And your next news update is at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by In the Know with Wealth Management Group, hosted by Craig Bolanos. Heard Sunday mornings at 10.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Tweet to the show from David Lucas. Which is more likely? Comey et al. Are incompetent law professionals who made 17 errors during the Crossfire operation, or that they are biased political hacks who knew exactly what they were doing and thought they wouldn't get caught. I don't find those two to be mutually exclusive. I think they can be both incompetent and political hacks. And the incompetent piece, which hasn't been talked about enough, is sort of what Ted Cruz was getting at in one of his exchanges with Horowitz on the Hill yesterday.
I can tell you from my time at the Department of Justice and from my time in law enforcement, any responsible leader, when hearing that you're talking about sending in spies and sending in a wiretap on any presidential nominee, should say, what in the hell are we doing? And by the way, the people up the chain who are saying we didn't know, if you had responsible leadership, there's no more important decision than you make. I can tell you when I was at DOJ, if someone said, let's tap Hillary Clinton, or let's tap Bill Clinton or John Kerry, the people there would have said, what in the hell are you talking about? What was going on here? This wasn't Jason Bourne. This was Beavis and Butthead.
Senator Klobuchar.
You said tap Hillary Clinton. you said tap Hillary.
That's pretty good, Dan.
Thank
I
you
love
very
it.
much. Yeah, that's a little.
They'll be performing at Zanies this week.
Little hat tip to Mike Judge
Vernon
there.
Hills.
Ted Cruz also pointed out one of the most egregious acts that Horowitz found, and this is the fraud that was perpetrated on the FISA court.
So the men and women at home need to know what's happening. A lawyer at the FBI creates fraudulent evidence, alters an email. That is in turn used as the basis for a sworn statement to the court that the court relies on. Am I stating that accurately?
That's correct. That is what occurred.
And in summary, how bad was it?
How bad was it?
Yeah, it's nice Ed McMahon you do.
Thank you.
Senator Tillis, very quickly, I think Senator Blumenthal makes a good point. How would you describe the behavior here of knowing that the subsource disavows the dossier that was the primary reason you got a warrant, finding that a lawyer doctored an email to keep the investigation going in a way unfair to Mr. Page? This is not routine. Do you agree with that?
It is definitely not. It certainly better not be routine, and I don't know any reason to think it is routine.
Is it kind of off the charts bad?
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
How bad is it?
How bad does Kevin Brock think it is? We're going to ask him. Kevin Brock is a former assistant director of intelligence for the FBI and principal deputy director of the National Counterterrorism Center at present. He has written at thehill.com about the IG's report and been following this, of course, as a veteran of the agency. Kevin, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So how bad is it, or was it?
Oh.
Pretty bad, said Horowitz.
I'll tell you how bad it was. It's those of us who spent any time in the FBI, and I spent 24 years, and I've talked to a lot of retired agents and current agents. This is unprecedented in history of the FBI. You cannot categorize this litany of horrible errors and omissions and withholding of evidence as oversight or accidental or sloppy. This was purposeful. It was done with precision, and it was done with a reason. I think we know what the reason is. We tend to view Comey's reign inside the FBI as an invasion of a virus inside a storied institution. He came in, he assembled around him people of like mind, of like partisan mind. They saw an opportunity, a very small opportunity, a sliver of a wisp of a reason to open up an investigation, and they went ahead, and this is very telling inside of the report itself. They didn't open, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but they didn't open what is normally done and open a preliminary inquiry with very limited investigative tools at your disposal. They went ahead on the thinnest of predication and opened up a full-blown investigation, which allowed them to use things such as human sources and record unwittingly members of the campaign, and to seek a electronic surveillance of one of the campaign advisors, Carter Page. This is breathtaking. And when you put it in perspective with what's gone on in the FBI over history. So,
yeah, it's an abuse of power, but then you have Jim Baker is asking the president to apologize to the FBI, which makes no sense. Just because the FBI they didn't tap President or then candidate Trump's phone lines, but they were messing with his campaign members.
Yeah. So yes, we abused you and we violated constitutional rights of certain people of the campaign, but please apologize to us for being outraged over that. It doesn't make sense.
Well, you got to admit they're pretty good at staying on message. I mean, Jim Comey this week upon the release of the report saying basically exonerated. Finally, he's had his day. The FBI is what the American people should want it to be. The problem is that Trump wants to burn down the FBI because he doesn't stand for the rule of law, and the FBI does, and it certainly did when he was director.
Well, yeah, I love the way he lumps himself in with the rest of the FBI. Jim Comey was not part of the FBI. He came in from outside, had a very destructive directorship while he was there, and now is using the mantle of the FBI as kind of top cover for his actions. It won't stand, and we've got to expose this more and more. He has used his directorship of the FBI for two reasons. Number one, to advance a political agenda, and number two, to enrich himself. He is making money by his own admission. He says he's making crazy money off of exploiting his misadventures by being paid for town halls and writing books and that type of thing.
One of the things that came out of the hearing yesterday is a discussion of the future of the FISA courts. Now that we know that a fraud was perpetrated on the court, not necessarily blaming the FISA judge, but structurally we see a problem and an avenue for abuse that was used. And so and Lindsey Graham talked generally about the need for fundamental reforms if FISA courts are going to continue to exist. Number one, do you think they should exist? Number two, if so, what reforms, if any, do you think should be applied? One that I offered earlier was it's got to be an adversarial process so that there's some pushback to the moving law enforcement or intelligence agency that's seeking a surveillance warrant, particularly in sensitive cases like this. And they're all sensitive when they're seeking surveillance warrants.
All right. Well, it would be, I think, overkill and a shame to do away with the FISA process that is used effectively against enemies of the United States, foreign enemies of the United States. I think when it is directed towards a U.S. person, it certainly needs more scrutiny than was evidenced in this whole sad episode. But there is room for reform. The whispers traditionally inside government that it was too easy to get a FISA warrant, and that the courts accepted at face value the facts that were presented by the government in order to obtain FISA. So that has to be looked at, and it can't have the perception or the reputation of just being a rubber stamp court. That can't stand, particularly when the authorities of the government are directed towards a U.S. person. So there is room for improvement, I think. One of the sad fallouts of all of this would be if we muted or defanged some of the capabilities of legitimate capabilities of the FISA court, where we need them in order to counter the actions of hostile foreign nations in this country.
Thinking about everything that you've seen so far, that you've read, that you know because of your experience in the FBI, and your spidey senses developed over 25 years there, have you seen anything that rises to the level of criminality? I mean, do you think, in addition to professional sanctions, particularly against the lawyer who perpetrated a fraud on the court, there, and perhaps supervisors involved as well, there's anything that has been done that rises to the level of criminality?
Yeah, I like your term, spidey senses. Everybody's spidey senses are firing right now after reading that report, and I think there is room for questions or for investigation into whether or not there was criminal intent here to defraud. On the surface, and reading through this, I think there's every reason to suspect that occurred. What I resist, however, and the way the report is written, it kind of gives too much top cover to senior leadership, and it intimates that a lot of these decisions were made at lower levels independently. I don't buy that for a minute. I think this was orchestrated from the top. I think the orders were cast down from the top, and I am hoping that independent investigations such as those by U.S. Attorney John Durham under Attorney General Barr will expose the extent of the purposeful manipulation of authorities here. It's very, very important that somebody is held responsible for this. It would be difficult for the FBI to restore trust, regain the trust of the American people, if all of this is exposed and nothing happens.
Well, there's no other way to get the FBI's reputation back, don't you think? That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by the pushback from Durham and Barr on Horowitz's conclusions about number one, the propriety of initiating the investigation in the first place? It seemed to me that both of them were, particularly Durham was saying, hey, look, I get why Horowitz drew the conclusions that he drew. His scope is the machinations of the Justice Department internally. My scope is external. It's broader. I have information and scope he doesn't have, and so our conclusions may not line up ultimately. Yeah,
I was not surprised by the reaction. I was a little bit surprised by the swiftness of his reaction and the public nature of it, but not surprised at all that he's drawing different conclusions. In fairness to the IG, and I thought the IG did a responsible job yesterday in his testimony before Congress. In fairness to him, he is there to look at any violations of policies and procedures by members of the Department of Justice and the FBI. It's not a criminal investigation. It's not an intelligence gathering investigation. It has its limits, and he did what he could do within those limits. I think he was mistaken in making a statement that using the term that he used, that there was no documentary or testimonial evidence of bias. I think he should have basically made a statement to the effect, that's beyond my scope to make that judgment. But yesterday, I think he, after hearing some of the immediate feedback of the ridiculousness or absurdity of that statement, he used the opportunity yesterday to clarify that he's not making a call, nor can he make a call as to whether or not bias motivated these actions, and that he left open the door that certainly they could have.
He is Kevin Brock, former Assistant Director of Intelligence for the FBI, Principal Deputy Director of the National Counterterrorism Center now. His piece at the Hill, hill.com, which I'll tweet out, Misfired Hurricane, Comey's team abused Carter Page at the FBI. That's worth a read. Kevin Brock, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. The Fed holding the line on interest rates. The FAA won't clear Boeing's 737 MAX jetliners. General Motors plows ahead with SUVs for Americans. Those stories are next.
Ike was such a sweet, lovable animal, and people would want to pet him, and they'd come up and they'd get close to him, and it would be this instant, oh! My dad didn't want to touch him. It's like, ooh, get the stinky dog away from me.
Even after we'd give her a bath, she would still stink.
Very stinky, both bad breath and bad gas. I asked the vet, and he said some dogs are just stinky.
Does your dog itch, scratch, stink, or shed like crazy? Come to Dinovite for help.
DINOVITE.com.
The omega-3 fatty acids.
Flaxseed, zinc, alfalfa. The digestive enzymes that are cooked out of regular dog food. The ingredients convinced me that it was definitely worth trying. After about a week, he started